Okay, tonight I'm speaking to Mike Watkiss, investigative reporter with KTKV-TV. Mr. Watkiss has been following and reporting the Warren Jeffs trial for years now in Texas, Utah, and Arizona. And from what I understand, he's left a trail of broken lives, lost boys, child brides, brainwashed followers, and women and children fleeing in the night, and sometimes without their children. And so I was just kind of trying to get a better feel for this man and all of that, and I think that Mr. Watkiss is a really good person to do that for us. And so I'd like to see what he thinks on this.
Well, it's really nice to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. The bottom line is this is not new in the landscape of this great country. This group and various polygamous groups have been around for well over a century after the Mormon Church stopped practicing polygamy. A lot of the followers of the church said, hey, we're going to continue to practice polygamy. And they went to isolated places like Colorado City and Hilldale, Utah, which is right along the Utah-Arizona border, a very remote area. And they have grown to be a very large community, a powerful political force. And Mr. Jeffs is just their newest leader. He has clearly taken the religion, the belief in a direction that I think people find a lot more ominous. The underage marriages, I think, have become a lot more pronounced. The phenomenon of the boys being thrown out is much greater now. A lot of the families are sustained by welfare money. And so there's just a lot of issues, and we're seeing it sort of all crystallize in a Texas courtroom where Mr. Jeffs is now on trial for sexually assaulting two young girls, one 12 and one 15, that he took as plural brides.
Right. Well, so I understand that Mr. Jeffs was on trial before in Utah, correct?
That's right, and found guilty of basically being a co-conspirator to a sexual assault on a young woman, a brave young woman named Alyssa Wall, who's now become sort of famous. She, at the age of 14, was told by Mr. Jeffs, she didn't want to do it, but she was told by Mr. Jeffs that she will marry her 19-year-old first cousin. So a forced marriage with incest implications. Mr. Jeffs was found guilty, and then the Utah Supreme Court, by my estimation, on sort of a trivial technicality, threw it out, a jury instruction that really wouldn't have made a difference. But so that prosecution, that successful prosecution, has fallen apart. Actually, Arizona was the first state to file charges, but they deferred to Utah because they thought Utah had a stronger case. But so many years have now passed. The alleged victims in Arizona no longer want to participate. So the prosecutions in both Utah and Arizona have fallen apart, and now really the only way to hold Mr. Jeffs accountable is here in Texas with this trial that is now going on.
Wow. Well, so he had his conviction overturned in Utah, and then that's the way it remained.
And that's the way it remains, and I don't believe at this point Utah prosecutors are going to mount a case again against Mr. Jeffs. There's just too much water under the bridge, whether Alyssa Wall wants to do it. She has now written a book which will make it easier for defense attorneys to sort of, anytime, this is why they always tell witnesses or victims not to talk too much, because if you tell too many stories, it suddenly becomes, and I think she has told the absolute truth. But it'll be easier to sort of beat her up on the witness stand, and I just don't think she wants to go through it again. So really, it all boils down to Texas. And if this thing falls apart, Mr. Jeffs walks, and these guys will go right back to what they've been doing for generations.
Well, so this situation in Texas, I know that they went in, and of course they took all the kids in 2008, correct? Was it 2008?
Right, yeah. Yeah, they were in the spring of 2008.
How many of those children were returned? I read the stats
all of
them were returned, even the pregnant ones?
More than 400 children were taken out of there. I can tell you that most of the caseworkers with the Child Protective Services here in Texas think the children should not have been returned. but in many ways the media has chronically been dumb and gullible in this case. And in the wake of the rape, the FLDS community orchestrated a very well-honed media campaign. They trotted a bunch of teary-eyed mothers in their prairie dresses. Many of them had given their daughters up and were really part of this. And the media bought it. And Texas officials, not the actual caseworkers, but Texas officials felt the pressure and said, give the kids back, with this media onslaught of sympathetic coverage. And it was bad, and the media has been very involved in this, and for my money, generally very negative. They drop in and occasionally cover the story, and then forget. This has just been going on forever, and there's well-documented history, and then nobody seems to do anything.
Truth Finders is getting involved. Truth Finders for Justice. We are so tired of getting all of this skewed media, whether it's biased or bullying or vilifying or skewed, just whatever. It's not accurate, and unfortunately we're so saturated by it, and people are so busy in their lives, they're not going to the extra trouble that is really required to find out what the news is, where it's accurate, where it's not. I mean, I'm doing that now, and it's so hard, and it takes all my time. So I can imagine a regular person with a job and a family, this is not okay. So
well, if the media in their infinite capacity to sort of move on to the next story, if this trial is come and gone, these guys will go back to the chronic marrying of these underage girls and the casting aside of the boys. I'm hoping that we've sort of reached critical mass and there's now enough coverage, because it really is one of those kind of things that their history, and it just goes back forever. They've been doing this for as long as they have been around, and
hiding behind the shield of religion.
Yeah, hiding behind their shields of religion. When they get in trouble, they hide behind the skirts of the ladies in the prairie dresses. They hide behind God, and it's really a society where women have very few rights, and women and girls suffer. And another generation will be lost if the media forgets about this as soon as Mr. Jeff's trial is over.
See, we don't want that to happen, and we.
Well, good for you.
Well, thanks.
I'm pleased for that.
Thank you. Good for the Truth Finders, because let me tell you, there are a lot of them out there, 6,000 plus right now and growing, and it's a movement. I think that the Casey Anthony trial really gleans forth a lot of people that are more reasonable and open-minded and are just tired of the frenzied up stuff that's going on, and it's like, okay, wait, this is crazy. What is really going on? And the Jeff trial's emerging now, and it for me, even just to start investigating everything that's unfolding is just amazing. And now I just so want to be able to get the truth out there. I think people deserve it, and I think every time someone starts talking about the truth in the regular media outlets, they just get shut up. They get cut off.
Yeah, the truth can be an elusive thing, it seems to in these days, with just too
on
many
our network, we don't have
talking
that problem.
heads on network. Say again?
I know, it's like we don't have that problem. We're like Sirius Radio. We can say pretty much what we want. No, who's leading them now? That he's in.
Mr. Jeffs is still leading them, and he's clearly got people who are. He's been incarcerated since he was arrested outside of Vegas back in 2006. So he's been behind bars for a long time.
Right? Like thousands of dollars in phones.
Disguises, thousands of dollars, all kinds of surveillance equipment that would have helped him elude police. It was jam-packed. There's an audio tape that they're going to play tomorrow in court of him allegedly sexually assaulting a 12-year-old. That they found that in his red Escalade when he was busted outside of Vegas. It was a treasure trove of information. They used some of it in his Utah trial. They're using some of it here, but they got lots of evidence against Mr. Jeffs. They have DNA to show that he fathered a child. He took a 14-year-old as a bride. When she was 14, she had a baby with him. DNA shows when she was 15. That's one of the charges. Another one is that he sexually assaulted a 12-year-old. They're going to play in this audio tape that they found in his vehicle that apparently chronicles the actual sexual assault.
Wow.
So a lot of evidence, and I'm hoping that people do indeed pay attention longer than just this trial, because if they don't, my fear is that yet another generation of the young women in that community and young men will be lost to these practices that I think are very abusive.
Yeah, I don't want to see that happen, and I certainly hope that Truth Finders for Justice can have some kind of part in helping expose what's really going on. And I don't know how long this is going to last or what's going to happen, but I know that education is really the key to everything. And when you educate people and you tell the truth and you keep telling it, that it does bring change, and you got to start somewhere.
Well, and let me make one point on that. And I've seen people saying, well, why don't vilify? There are a lot of really decent people who are the products of their environment, and the nation shouldn't vilify them. Most of the people out there are victims. The men, the higher echelon men, are the real villains. Some of the moms are sort of the enforcers, and so there's plenty of culpability. But I really do hope that the American public sort of takes a deep breath and recognizes that most of the people inside that community are not bad people. They got really bad leaders.
What do you think that Americans can do for the situation, for the people? I mean, what can Americans do, from something that seems reasonable to something that you just can't imagine it could happen? But I mean, anything and everything. What can we do?
Well, because Mr. Jeffs and his community have basically been ignored in Utah and Arizona, where their stronghold is, have been ignored for decades. He started to get a little heat, and he went out and started compound building. Excuse me, I got a siren going by me here. And they now have compounds in South Dakota, in the Four Corners area of Colorado, the two home bases along the Utah-Arizona border. They
and in
have
Canada?
associate. They have there's an outpost in Canada. They're in Nevada. If they show up in your neighborhood, I think that you have to demand that law enforcement is keeping an eye, that the children are not being deprived of any meaningful education, that they're not impregnating girls at 12, and they're not, if they're throwing their sons out, when they're adolescents because they're
that's the problem.
You got to start. You got to lean on law enforcement and make sure. You know what? Go in and make cases. There are perpetrators in this community. Find them, bust them, and send the message that it's not going to happen in our town. That's what you got to do.
Do you think that I've done a little research and I've noticed that there seems to be two kinds: the extremists, like we see with Warren Jeffs and the SLDS, the people that have broke off and do what they do, and then some of the families that I've seen in my research where they're just regular average families. Their kids are in regular schools, they play music, blah blah blah, they live a regular life. They just have.
And that's a very good point, because people say you're just attacking these people, and it's such a vicious, a religious assault on these people.
It doesn't seem like there's abuse in those families.
There are a lot of polygamous type families in America. Some of them are very much like that Big Love show or that reality TV show, where the women are fairly mature, they've obviously had some education, and they're adults. That's the most important thing. I think most people in America really don't give a darn what consenting adults do behind closed doors, as long as their children are being educated and have some choices. If they want to be there or they don't. But that's not the case in the FLDS. Mr. Jeffs pulled all of his kids, one of the first ominous signs when he was sort of rising to power, just before the turn of the century, he pulled all of their children out of public education. Those of us that had been watching knew that this was not a good sign. Know that Mr. Jeffs was driving this ship in a bad direction. I think, and a lot of polygamists were saying, oh, well, you're attacking all of us. You know what? To my knowledge,